But over to the main event, and I have the pleasure in handing over to the Membership Committee Chairman, Sharon Constanzen.
Hi everybody, lovely to see friends, family. That's the way I feel about this livery company at this point in time. And I know we have got some wardens with us. I don't see the master, I see past masters. So welcome to the members of the court of the livery company, to members of the livery company itself, and to our guests. Welcome to everybody. It's lovely to see such a high population of attendance. We're doing a series of these webinars. We're giving things of relevance, but we're not doing everything that's only company secretarial. So we're wanting to broaden the reach. And given the circumstances the country is in from a COVID position, we thought this would be actually quite a topical subject for all of us to cover. So we have got a very esteemed panel of very different people to discuss it with you. Yes, I'm chairman of the membership committee. We have a number of our members on the event with us today, who without I could not achieve what we need to do. You're not here to listen to me. I am going to be handing over to my team. This will be a shared event between a number of the committee members. So to begin with, can I hand over to Rob, who will introduce the first two guests. I will introduce the third guest, and then Grace will introduce and speak to the fourth guest. And then we have anything up to whatever networking time we want afterwards. Robin, unfortunately, will be leaving pretty quickly, and I believe Justin Kennedy will also be leaving pretty quickly afterwards. So questions to them first will be where we will be at the beginning of the hour. So Rob, if I could hand over to you and Justin, please. Rob got kicked out somehow. We're just letting him back in again. Rob, you with us?
Yes.
Can you go live, please, sir?
I'm back. So my apologies. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Justin Kennedy. I had the pleasure of hearing him speak, and we both first met around 3 or 4 years ago in Dubai. So Dr. Kennedy, if you would please join us and open up with your opening lines.
Sorry, Rob, I had myself on mute and blackout by mistake. I'm sorry, but I'm here. Nice to see you.
Excellent. So I'm just going to throw up your presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Keith, if you could just enable me to share. Okay. Over to you, Dr. Kennedy.
So Rob, let's begin with the end in mind. First of all, thanks for remembering me after all these years. It was really nice to meet you, and it's really an honor to be here. So Sharon and everybody, thanks for pulling this together. I'm really happy to be here. So Rob, when we spoke last, we thought to share some of the stuff I've been up to since we last spoke.
Yes.
When Rob and I first met everybody, I was doing a presentation regarding my journey from being in a coma to being a professor of neuroscience. So if you want to hear the full story, go and buy the book. Just kidding. And for those of you who want a copy of the book, please get in contact with me. One or two of you will be winning a copy of the book at the end of the presentation, so we'll get to that in a second. The focus of today's presentation and discussion, Rob, was around the work with the business school in developing a model around organizational well-being neuroscience. which I've called the OWN model, which I would like to tell everybody that I own the IP of this model, and you can't have it. I published it, it's all mine. So the organizational well-being neuroscience model looks at what you need to do to build resilience while at work. And the conversations, Rob, were all about that and what is required. So that was the topic, if that makes sense, Rob. Am I on the right page?
Yes.
Very good. So do you want to ask me any questions? Should I just shoot from the hip? Do you want to show some slides? What is best?
Well, you've got the slide up of your brain scan.
I can't see the slides. I wonder why I can't see the slides. Can everybody else see the slides?
Rob, you haven't shared?
Yeah, shared.
Well, sharing is caring, but you're not.
Okay. Let's try to share again. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
No, I can't see anything now. Can you all see?
Yep, you should be able to see it now.
No.
No?
Anyway, I know the slides well enough. Why don't you just talk through them with me, Rob?
So you've got the how to reboot your brain, and you wrote, that's obviously your bestseller, your book about your incredible journey of resilience and bouncing back or bouncing forward, as some psychologists would say, using that as a springboard. Maybe you could briefly tell us about the picture of the scan and how you moved forward from that terrible situation, being in a coma.
Very good. The journey from being in a coma to waking up is always a bit startling, because you don't really know what's going on, and it takes a lot longer for you to simply wake up. It's a bit blurry. You feel like you've had far too many pints and you don't really know what's going on so much. So
Yes.
the process is very slow, and learning to walk and talk was all very, very stressful. But learning to control my emotions was most the difficult part. You know, you're all over the place, from crying to being angry to being depressed and stressed. It all happens so immediately. So out of that experience, I spent a lot of time kind of becoming the investigator of my own brain, because I didn't have anyone else to look at. And it looked at, what can I do to reboot myself? And it became a conversation with occupational therapists and psychotherapists and physiotherapists and any other therapist you can imagine. And out of that process, it ended up being a PhD, because I was invited into a business school discussion. It then became a program around what you need to do to build your resilience. And then on the basis of that research, it became an academic textbook chapter around organizational well-being. So the journey has basically been very stressful, Rob. It's been very unhealthy to get into the place to speak around resilience, which is not a great place to start, but hopefully it will be a sustainable place of resilience.
Fantastic. And talking about resilience, if we think about some of the areas about the work and the spectrum of what you've been doing, you mentioned about you did a PhD, and one of the things that you do is you work with clients that are either PhD students all the way through to senior executives. So maybe you could talk along the lines of what you're doing there. And how that has actually, your journey has helped them. Okay,
so with the PhD students, I like working with them because you can tell them what to do. No, I'm teasing. PhD supervision is moving a lot more towards the coaching framework. So anybody on the call who wants to learn about how to do a professional PhD, I'm happy to give you some of my time to show you the road to Mecca of getting your doctoral degree. So that's a discussion open for opportunity for those people who are interested. Working with executives and organizations is really the focus of my work, and helping organizations build a culture of well-being. But as you know, I'm sure all of you would agree that organizations follow leaders. Leaders build culture, and you need to embed that culture of well-being, which is, you know, so easy to forget, especially after the last couple of years, or however long it was. It feels like a decade of this COVID pandemic. Organizations are trying to manage resilience remotely has been near impossible, and depression levels are up, suicide levels are up, physical well-being is down. You know, it's really been a terrible place for people over the last while. So helping people find those brain hacks, as I like to call them, to build that resilience has been really invaluable for many people.
And what would you say about mental health? Obviously, mental health still has such a stigma within organizations. And what do you think companies can do to help educate their employees and also their leadership?
Well, I think that's a great question, and Briani, you can answer that when you get a chance. So,
very good.
But anyway, I'll give it a quick snap. My belief is around the SNAP model, which looks at the social neuroscience of affective psychology, which sounds far too academic. But what it means is that well-being is a social factor, and it is an emotional, affective, psychological place. So what we have been doing is applying a psychological safety assessment tool to look at what needs to happen in the organization, what interventions are needed to be in place, and then pull it all together to make sure there is some sustainable change. So there is a tool we use to assess psychological safety. And on the backbone of that is the model of social neuroscience and affective psychological safety. But if those organizations that want to learn more about how to embed that system of psychological safety and therefore improve well-being and resilience, I'm happy to speak about that as well. I mean, it's a useful conversation to embed those protocols within an organization, if that sounds like a good answer, Rob.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think it would be great if you would tell us more about your, you've got a test that you have prepared for your, on your website. It talks around how people can, where am I? Here we go. It's talking about the reboot, and then they take the personality test. I'm just going to share my screen again, which is pulling up that particular slide.
I mean,
and then
I can speak about it. I've dropped the link in the chat so people can go and look at it if they like, Rob. Can I give you the short version of the long story? Would you mind if I tell you
yes.
that kind of this?
We've got a minute to complete the session.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Justin.
I'm going to take a minute and 1 second, and you can't stop. So we developed this neuropsychological assessment based on the work done at Harvard around a similar protocol that showed if you fail this test, the likelihood of you having a heart attack or heart-related disease is extremely high. So those of you who are feeling brave, please click and go onto that test, professorkennedy.com/personality test. And if you do, you'll be one of the lucky winners of my bestseller of my book, According to My Wife. And I'm happy to share with those results to help you look at what are the sociological and the affective functions of resilience. Those are the two pillars, in my opinion, mainly because the brain isn't very good at understanding what well-being is. It's very good at reading social markers, and it's very good at blowing up emotionally. So have a look at the assessment. Speak to me about any of your interest in this work. Complete the test, and you might be one of the lucky winners. And if you don't repeat it. I'm going to make you read the textbook, and then you'll be sorry.
Rob, would you like to move across to Neru?
Yes, thank you very much.
Rob. Thanks very much, Rob. That was fun.
Dr. Kennedy, pleasure as always speaking to you and hearing your stories. Again, I would like to welcome Nero Sharma. Nero and I met, must be at least 7-8 years in Dubai, at the Business Network Institute, where we were talking about various aspects, and our directions of life have changed. So Nero, maybe you could tell us more about what you've been up to, your journey and your story, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And I'm so excited to share my own experience about change and transitions. And I think we're all all of us are in the middle of a transition. So I'm an executive coach, and I work with senior leaders to lead their organizations and teams through complexity. Before I became a coach, I've been full-time coaching now for about 12 years. I used to be an innovation consultant, and I used to show up at client sites kind of with this expert badge and having to project that I'm the expert and I know everything about what you're supposed to do. And what I actually realized was that especially with this increased complexity and rapid change that was happening in every single business that I was working with, I had absolutely no idea what was the right strategy. And however, I did have a skill of curiosity and asking questions and genuinely being interested in what was happening. And that's where I started kind of transitioning towards becoming a coach. And what I realized actually is we could sit in a workshop and draw out these amazing business models, but the execution was a nightmare. And even though the innovation champions wanted to implement and go with the change, and they had experienced the shift in their own mindset in this workshop, when they went back to work, everything was the same. They had to go back to the old way of doing things. And we talk about change, and we talk about how change is so difficult. And we kind of have this expectation that I have to reach this place. It's like a destination, it's a milestone maybe, but we miss out on what has to happen in order for us to get there. And there's a lot of action that needs to happen. There's a lot of mindset shifts that need to happen, a lot of resilience that needs to happen, and so much of emotional processing. And especially when we look at work, and I know that now there's a lot more acceptance for emotional processing, but it is when you show up at work, whether you're a man or a woman, you better be strong, and you're not allowed to get emotional, and you shouldn't behave in this way. And those kind of behaviors, which we're kind of taught at college and school in terms of this is how we behave professionally, were actually coming up as being kind of slowing down this transition and this journey. And I believe that in my work, I myself have to go through my own personal transition. So I've actually just moved a couple of months ago to the US. I established a business in Dubai, and this is the 7th country that I've lived in. So I grew up in Africa. I lived in Zambia, Botswana, and I have moved my life and my business, and every single time kind of having to reinvent myself. So I think a lot of my learning is also informed from my own personal experiences that I am going through, but also being able to share it, with leaders who are also going through this kind of change. And change is hard. And I think last year we were all kind of pushed over the edge with the lockdowns and the question about whether the lockdown is happening, is it continuing? Are we going to have a little bit of freedom or not? And there's so much of confusion around that. And I wanted to share a framework that I have found useful. It's not my own framework. I learned it through one of the coach trainings that I have been a part of, and it's called the Organizational and Relationship Systems Coaching. And it's kind of a coaching framework where we understand that as we are looking to change and to move to a different state of being, we cannot be doing this on our own. We operate within a system. And so our awareness of that system and how that system is changing kind of really plays a big role in terms of how we respond to that change. And I'm just going to offer, a framework which might be useful for you all as you're navigating the change, to see where do I stand, and also as you lead your teams and your companies, and how they, you might be able to support your team in terms of how they're processing transformation. And so the framework kind of says that there are three kind of responses primarily to change. So we all, the natural human tendency is to kind of, first stop and reject the change. And we have, people who we call the leapers. The leapers are the ones who grab change. They're like, awesome, I'm going to start this. These are the people who have the latest iPhone gadgets. And, they're the ones who stay up at 1 a.m. outside the Apple store waiting for the latest gadget. They're the ones who it excites them to, to have something new to do. They're the ones, when you say we have to come to work to office, they're going to be there right in the beginning. In fact, they might be the people who are leading the transition to say, let's go back to the office. The second type of people are what we call the bridge builders. These are the people who need more data. They need to know how. They ask a lot of questions. They're more concerned in the details. How is this going to happen? When are we going to move? Who's going to move first? Who needs to move? And then the third people are what we call the tradition holders. And the tradition holders are so important because they help us make sure that as we're kind of navigating this change from innovation and traditions, that we don't drop one, or we don't focus on the polarity. That they're the ones who hold the space for us to say, what's important that we need to keep, like which are our values maybe, or what is it that we don't want to change. And they're the ones who, I guess, seemingly we might see are the difficult ones, are the ones who are rejecting change. And it's so important as leaders to recognize who in our team falls into each of these different groups, and how we might leverage the strengths of their inherent approach to change to enable us to bide this transition. So change is not going to happen overnight, and it is going to take time, but we get to choose how we navigate that change through being more conscious about the transition, the period of transition, recognizing it and surfacing it and having conversations around it. So that's kind of what I had to share. If there are any questions or anything about that, I think we could talk about it later. I don't know, Rob, if you have any other questions.
Well, I think if we think about COVID, and you touched on it, COVID has really made many of us think about our own priorities. And I wondered what you thought about what some of the biggest changes companies will have to face as they transition to the new working normal and environment, and maybe some of the aspects of resistance from employees out of fear of going back to the office, and re-socializing. People miss socializing, but it's been 18 months and some people haven't been back in the office. So if you could briefly tell us
absolutely.
So.
And I'm a coach, and I'm a change leader, but I also recognize that when change happens to me, like I was the one who locked my door and didn't want to talk to anybody for months, and I didn't want to meet anybody. We all have a different response, and sometimes maybe it's the leader's response to change that affects how the organization responds. And I think as we go forward, we have to recognize that we're all at different stages of our own development as adults, that we will be making sense of what's happening in different ways. Now when you have conversations with your colleagues, probably even in the same industry, you may realize that someone's like, okay, we're going back. And then the others are like, no, like, there's no way we can go back yet. There's another variant coming. So I think that we have to recognize that each of us in the same industry as well is going to be making sense of what's happening and what's most appropriate for us. And I guess this is a chance for us to not go with the crowd, and the definition of normal is what the majority possesses. It's not that it's necessarily right. We call it normal just because majority of people have it. And so I think that this time of us kind of, when do we go back? It's really inviting us to stretch ourselves a little bit and say, is there a different way that I would like to do it? Depending on how we are making sense of what's happening and what's the most appropriate for us. And I guess that you will see different responses within the same industries that are more appropriate and that are more, long lasting. And that will, I guess, it'll help us to see very different responses.
Yes, thank you. And very last question for you, just before we hand over to the next speaker. What can employers do to provide a confidential and safe environment to encourage employees to talk about possible addictions, trauma, or even suicidal thoughts? And obviously during this time, people have really been mentally challenged. I know I've been in quarantine a number of times and locked down in hotel rooms, and
yes,
and it has a big mental strain.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it's, thank you for bringing it up, because, we tend to shy away from talking about these things, and we see trauma happening every day. Like just yesterday, I was talking to somebody who is in quarantine for 10 days and her father just passed away. And so like you're going through a major life transition and you're having to do it isolated. And, we tend to show up with a nice mask and a smile on our face. And I think, a couple of things that organizations could do is just bring in a slight shift in agenda of meetings, maybe, check in with people, have leaders kind of reach out and check in with people, how they're doing. But I guess also having kind of these circles and safe spaces where people can go without them feeling like I'm going to be viewed as someone who can't handle stress, and it's going to affect my career, and it's going to affect my promotion and my salary, and maybe I'm going to get laid off. So I think that is something which is on the leaders to communicate that it's okay, and I think that's a shift that needs to happen for the leaders themselves, and it's important that we talk about it a lot more. So I'm glad that you've raised it as a question. Thank you so much for that, Rob. It is so important. And I invite everyone to kind of take this back to your organizations, and I guess the client organizations that you work with, and really, ask the question, what are you doing to enable well-being of your team during this time?
Neuro, that was absolutely insightful. I can see that this
Thank you.
theme and the commonality between our different panelists. Briony, if you could join us, please, off mic or on mic, whichever the way we want to describe it. Briony, you and I are going to have a conversation around some of the things that we think are pertinent to talk about. I know some of the things and the words are very common to what we've seen already. As a coach, which is what you are doing, you work with teams, you work with individuals, you work with organizations. And we recognize we're in a time of greater well-being recognition by stakeholders in our businesses and in our lives. But just taking something very pertinent to right now, today, yesterday, the Prime Minister has extended the lockdown. We are now in a world we had hoped 6 months ago we weren't going to be in. What is this doing for individuals? How is this uncertainty creating stress for people, and how is this constant change, constant unknown, impacting people's mental well-being?
Yeah, okay, thank you, and hello everyone, thanks for having me. Well, many different ways, because like Neera has just beautifully explained, we respond in different ways. A lot of us really struggle with uncertainty, the unknown, and this was, a year ago, this was really coming up. What's happening? We like to know what's going on. We're very organised. We like to categorise things, particularly in Britain. For some people, it'll be a relief, because some people are very, very fearful about going into the workplace and things opening up. So other people want to get back into it, particularly people who work in services that have been pulled back or furloughed. It might be that they're not living the fulfillment they normally would do in life. So actually getting back into the workplace allows them to do that. But there's also, because this unknown has been for so long and it keeps going backwards and forwards and we're not quite sure, and then it shifts again. And there's also the sort of fatigue, the emotional tiredness of keeping going with that. So there's this also, you know, we're reeling from the last year and now we're in a new place of, okay, there's another 4 weeks and then we'll see. So it's just so complex and it's different for everyone, but it does have an impact on all of us. And I'm, you know, in my work, I'm all about bringing awareness. Start with the space of awareness, because when you open up that awareness, you can see what's going on, you can do something about it, and you can figure out what that thing, even if it's just one little thing.
What are the warning signs an individual should look for to understand that they are not in a resilient space and that they are at risk of not giving of their most and of potentially going into a downward spiral that requires medication or anything more structured care?
Okay, and the bottom line of it is changes. If you notice something different about yourself, if you're responding in different ways, that will be a key. In terms of like stress, so we all have different ways that shows up, and if you're not aware of it yourself, then perhaps ask someone that knows you very well, because they probably will know how you respond to stress and how it shows up. But, you know, think the basics, right? Sleeping longer than normal and sleeping less than normal, not being able to go to sleep, you know, in the appetite, all those kinds of changes are really key. For me, I hold my tension in my jaw, and that's quite normal. When it sort of creeps up my head and down my neck and into my shoulders and back, I know I need to do something about it. So I love working with the body, and I think there's so much information in our bodies. We live in our heads so much in this kind of culture, and to be able to check in with what's going on and how we're holding ourselves, how things are feeling, can really give us so much information. And our capacity for other people's people, you know, I've worked in caring professions. When I was young adult, I worked as a carer. I chose not to train as a nurse. I was a carer, and I've always done sort of jobs like that. But I know if I'm actually caring less about other people, which is a horrible, I feel my breath go when I said that, because I hate being in that place. I know that it's to do with my capacity. And the other thing, I suppose, if we're reactive, Justin spoke to emotions, you know, leading. If we're reactive and our emotions are leading, rather than us being able to use them as information, that's another key sign that we're perhaps not in the lead, able to choose how. Responsibility is literally the ability to respond, and responding is very different to reacting.
And how are teams working? Yeah, I know you do some team coaching and you find that very fulfilling. How does the individual within a team make a difference, and how does the team make a difference to the individuals? What is the value we can learn of collective well-being or not?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know where to start with that one. Well, starting with ourselves, again, that awareness, check in with how we're doing, what matters to us, what are our fears and how are they impacting how we're reacting. I think I said already, yeah, what we need, recognizing, acknowledging what we've been through this last year personally, because that's so different. You know, everyone, some kind of support network has not been as available. So there's so many things. Recognizing what we're bringing into the space in our team, because we might be bringing all that stuff with us, or we might be hiding it, as Neri was saying, not talking about it. It's still going to have an impact. So recognizing how we're showing up, and what our capacity is. Within the team, I find conversations so important. Just starting, having a conversation, putting on the table for a whole meeting, what do we need? Where's everyone at? What's it like to walk into the office today? To have a conversation like that, to actually be able to air it, can be massive in terms of investing in a team and well-being. To rather than, you know, have a bit of that and then carry on with the work, because all that stuff is going to rumble and impact the daily work and the team, the individuals ongoing, if it's not given space. And it's okay, for this is partly why I love the mental health first aid course that I now deliver, and why I love coaching, is being able to ask a question and not know where the conversation is going to go. And I think for a lot of leaders, that's quite scary. You know, I find it quite scary with my teenager. But I think it's a very important thing to do, is just to start a conversation and for people to voice. Nero was talking about change, and we react very differently if we've chosen the change to versus change happening to us. And if leaders are doing wonderful work, putting brilliant changes into place, but actually people haven't had a voice, there's still going to be a response or reaction to that.
I had an interesting circumstance today. I had a meeting with a legal firm with two people that I've had many meetings with, and in the last year, those meetings have been respectively in their country house, in their upper bedroom in North London, or in their study, or whatever it's been. And suddenly they both appeared in completely different environments, but not the same environment to each other. It was a very different environment. So it looked like the one was still in another new study that he obviously bought a new house. No, he's in the office for one of the first times he's been into the office. She says, so am I. And they were both in the office, in the same meeting with me, but neither of them had gone to go and find whether the other one was there. So we've got so Zoom orientated, they didn't even think to make the personal connection was the other one actually nearby or not, and they were in the same building. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and we have learned to, you know, we've also, is the element of that is having to put all the balls down. You know, we carry all these balls around in life, and if we carry too many, then we're going to end up dropping a load. This year has been a case of stepping back, seeing what we can carry at one time, and then learning to practice in a different way, and then forgetting perhaps like that. But I think a lot of teams are finding that disconnection, and it just shows up when we start spending time together, like that, you know, the other way around, people suddenly being on furlough or working from home, and potential fractures at home that hadn't been seen, but suddenly when you're spending more time together, that was shown up. So all these things affect our capacity.
If you look at the COVID world, that has materialized. Some businesses have absolutely excelled. They've gone out on a limb, they've been creative, and they've really made some good money. Others have literally closed down, and there's sort of many in the middle, obviously, as well. Those people that have absolutely excelled as individuals in this 18 months of the lockdown environment, what's in their DNA? How have they engineered it? What's made them different, coping, successful in the way that they have been?
I think being okay with stopping and taking stock, and that awareness. How am I doing? Like, what's going on? Which I think, for particularly as we get busier in life, that can be quite scary. Stopping and saying, how am I doing? Like, we tend to keep going if we're not sure what the answer is going to be. But also emotional agility versus emotional rigidity. Now, Susan Davis, she's been on TED Talks, and she's written a book called Emotional Agility. She's brilliant on this subject. How we respond to those emotions coming up, if we can see them as information, see what's going on, either use those emotions in a useful way, or be able to process through them, be with them, and then figure out what we want to do, versus the rigidity of just being sort of blinkered with one way. And obviously tenacity and stubbornness can be really useful, but it's about being able to really, you know, if we're in a river and you get hit by a current, you have to learn to shift your raft around it. And it's, like you said, it's creativity, but it's that sort of agility versus rigidity, and figuring out what's needed. And the bottom line of what we want in that. So for me, I know my bottom line is I want really deep smile lines in old age. That's my bottom line. So anything I come across in life, thanks, Rob, I can check it, like, is that making me feel that way? And if it's not, what do I need to do about it? It doesn't have to be, yes, I'm going to do this. This is my goal. In 10 years' time, I'm going to exactly do that. You could get 5 years into that and go, actually, no, that's changed. That picture has changed, because that's actually now not going to serve the wrinkles.
Creating them. I love that purpose in life and that focus, because you do smile unbelievably. Your eyes are always alive. And that's another thing that we had. I mean, Bryony and I don't know each other very well at all. We met just the other day, and this is the closest we've got to meeting one another. But the interesting thing is, Bryony asked me, how are you? You know how many people don't ask you that question? And she asked me, and yet I was asking her to come on to the event. And she had the beauty to say, this is a conversation. I'd like to know a bit about you. How are you? 10 out of 10. It's really, really lovely. What I'd like to ask as our last question, Brioni, is we're going to go back to a normal, which Neuro describes as being whatever the majority are finding acceptable. Talking to people today who are back in the city, seeing more activity in the city, going to be able to go and buy a different coffee, being able to walk around a building instead of your study. There are a lot of fears. How are people, some people, many, might view each other as dirty, risky, could kill me. How are people dealing with that part of the emotion? And the other side of it is, yeah, this is a virus, I've got to live with it. I've been vaccinated, I don't care. I'm just getting on with life, and social distancing and masks are not my story.
Yeah, and this, I've noticed my heart just go, this is the bit that makes me really sad, because, and not the recognizing that people have those feelings and there's going to be a paradoxical mix, but the I suppose my fear about, yes, this paradoxical opinions and seeing other people with their different experiences of this is different. And I think there's other polarizing conversations, whether you have the vaccine or not, other conversations that have come up in the year, such as Black Lives Matter. Unfortunately, around that, there are polarizing views, but there's been a lot of conversations that I feel that people are getting polarized around, and they're emotive. And that's something that makes me really sad. I hope that we can continue conversations in our communities, in the media, all of it, and have healthy, open questions rather than sort of blasting. And so I don't know. It's one of the things. But I think where the spaces we can do something about it, it's that, again, having those conversations, awareness in me. If I've got fears, where I'm judging someone, why am I judging someone? What's going on in me that I'm judging their choice? So I live across the road from some student halls, and since they came back in January, they, to begin with, for the first 2 months, they had parties every single night. Some nights we hear hundreds of people singing the same song. And it's not been easy. They live in our community and use our shops and all that kind of stuff in terms of the virus, but also the young people, they've had rites of passage not happen in their lives. They need to party, they need to socialize. So much of many of us are suffering from not having that socializing going on and that lightness. So it's, I think, for all of us, recognizing where we judge, what's underneath that judgment, recognizing what we need, what we're fearing, and also as things lift, what's okay for us. You know, is it okay for you to go and gather with friends at their house once we're allowed to? It might not be yet. You might need to take it slower, but someone else might not need to. They might need to just go in and have a dance in their kitchen. So yeah, I think that's such a difficult one. And we
Brioni,
do.
that's been absolutely amazing, so informative and so natural. And I think your students are very, very lucky people to have you. Thanks very much. I'm now going to hand to Grace, if you could introduce our last speaker, and Robin, take it away after that.
Hi, yeah, I have great pleasure in introducing Robin, who is from the Lord Mayor's Appeal campaign, This Is Me. And as a city livery company, it's so great to have her here because she works with a number of organisations within the city. And Robin, yeah, it'd be great to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Grace and Sharon and Robin and all of you for having me here with you today, and all to the panelists, and really interesting insights and conversations there. I'm Robin, I'm a Senior Programme Manager at the Lord Mayor's Appeal, as Grace said, and I lead our programme work, which is really focusing on how we can create a better city for all within London, for those who live there, those who work there, and for our neighbouring communities as well. And we really focus across 4 key priority areas, which is to make London a more inclusive city, a healthier city, a more skilled city, and a fairer city. And as Grace introduced, under our Healthy City work, we have a real focus on mental health and our This Is Me campaign, which I'm going to share with all of you. A bit more information about what that is, why it's important, how you can get involved within your businesses, and then share a short video at the end. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. And hopefully you can all see the slides there. So I think what the panelists in the discussions today have really highlighted the increased need for organisations supporting the mental health of their employees. We know that this has been a big priority area over the last 5 years, but what we've really seen is that the pandemic has really exacerbated the support and the need that we each of us have, that we need. And we've seen today already that that's different for different people, but what is a common thread is that organisations have a real role in supporting the mental health and well-being of their employees. We know that there's been fantastic amount of work done around reducing the stigma around mental health and encouraging people to come forward. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of work to be done within the workplace. The recent Business in the Community report, which looked at mental health at work at the end of 2020, showed that still only half of employees would feel comfortable coming forward to their manager, their employee, if they were having mental health problems or experiencing mental ill health. And as we all know, all of our mental health has suffered this year. What that looks like will be different for different people, but there's not one person who will not have been affected by the events of this year. So there's a real support need there, and we're seeing leaders and organisations and liveries like yourselves really prioritising this, which is fantastic. And that's really what our This Is Me campaign is here to do, is to support organisations end the stigma around mental health, supporting them to create more inclusive, healthier cultures within their workplace, ultimately to improve employee well-being. And we support organisations in a number of ways. I'll touch on briefly the different tools that we have, and then look at some of the change and the impact that that's made in the city that we are particularly excited about. So the first tool under our This Is Me programme is we support organisations to raise awareness of the importance of mental health in their workplace and really come together to demonstrate a visible commitment both internally to their people but also externally across the city and across the UK of their commitment to end the stigma, really showing those that may be struggling that it's okay to not be okay. And we do that through our Green Ribbon campaign, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, that runs during Mental Health Awareness Week and World Mental Health Day, and really brings the cities across the UK and increasingly globally together by wearing green ribbons, lighting your workplaces green. Of course, in the last couple of years, virtually wearing a green ribbon or sharing that on your social media. And really, I think, as we've touched on already, showing that whilst we are apart at the moment for some of us, whilst we're moving towards a transition potentially back to in-person workplace, we can still be together even if we're not all back in person yet. And when we may not be, what that looks like may be very different. The second area that we work with organisations on is really encouraging them to support their employees to share their lived experience of mental ill health. We know that storytelling and sharing experiences, like we've heard from our panelists today, is really powerful. It really helps to open up the conversation and dispel some of those myths and stereotypes that, you know, we still too often see associated with mental health. So I think we're much better nowadays in understanding that we all have mental health, like we all have physical health. But the reality is that all of us will be impacted by mental health challenges or mental ill health at some point in our lives, whether that's directly ourselves or indirectly through supporting a loved one. And it's really important to raise awareness and open up those conversations to show that, you know, you're not to be ashamed if you are struggling. It doesn't define you as a person. It's not going to impact your career trajectory. And that's what This Is Me storytelling really supports organisations to do. And that can be through creating a This Is Me film, creating blogs or sharing experiences, or even as Sharon touched on today, just sharing those individual experiences as well, one-on-one. So asking people, you know, how are you? You know, how are you really? You know, we have a tendency to go, yeah, I'm fine. Oh yeah, busy. I've got this thing going on. But, you know, actually just asking the question for a second time can actually help people slow down and you know, take an opportunity to share. And we know that that's incredibly valuable and will be incredibly valuable in workplaces going forward. And then finally, our third area where we support organisations is to really build the skills and confidence of employees and managers to have conversations around mental health. So we know that there can be a fear of saying the wrong thing. We know, especially for managers, we know more of them see supporting the mental health of their employees as part of their role, but very few, we know less than a quarter say they've been trained in how to do that. So really by supporting your managers, but also your employees to have those conversations and also look out for one another. So one of the questions earlier was, what are some of those warning signs that we can see both in ourselves, but also in our team and our colleagues and our people if they're not quite acting themselves. We developed that tool in partnership with Samaritans and PwC, and it really brings the Samaritans' expertise into the workplace and really focuses on the power of listening and active listening. And that's something that we can all take away as well when we're having conversations. Really listen to people, see how they're doing, and often by providing that forum for people to share and really have someone listen to that, we know that can make a real difference and can often prevent mental health challenges becoming worse or reaching crisis point as well. So there's a range of tools that come under This Is Me. It's a really flexible toolkit depending on where you are at as an organisation on your mental health agenda, what your priority and your focus areas are. And just to give a bit of a context to the wider campaign, so This Is Me originally started within Barclays. It was a Barclays internal initiative around mental health and disability. And the Lord Mayor's Appeal adopted This Is Me in 2016 because we really saw the impact it was having within Barclays, but we were also working with lots of city organisations who wanted to focus on anti-stigma work around mental health, but didn't have the tools or the support that they needed to do so, because we know it's not easy. If we fast forward, we're now in our 5th year and we've got over 1,000 organisations registered across the UK and increasingly internationally as well, which has the potential to reach almost 3 million employees, which is really phenomenal. And what we've seen with the campaign is what started as very much a City of London initiative has really been adopted by businesses, and they've really driven, it's really been business-led and business-driven, expanding the campaign to different cities across the UK as well. And you can see a list of our different areas that we have on the slide. So really the city has been a leading example in this and really been sharing that best practice both with one another across sectors, but also within different cities nationally as well, and really making that impact on employees. And you can see some of our other statistics around organisations sharing stories. Our virtual green ribbon travelled to over 100 cities during Mental Health Awareness Week this week in May. So there's really that commitment, a growing commitment from organisations really driving and pushing this agenda forward, which is brilliant. And then just to touch briefly, we know that, of course, the reach and the growth of the campaign is fantastic, but what is really important to us is that we know that it is having a tangible impact within organisations around creating more inclusive and open cultures around mental health. And we know that because we work with our This Is Me organisations and measure their progress every year. On the screen, you can see some of our statistics from our most recent survey in 2020. And what we're finding consistently across the last 5 years is that when organisations really use the tools under This Is Me to help build a culture that is really receptive to speaking around mental health, we know that that can have a phenomenal impact of their employees. We've seen that organisations say This Is Me has had a positive impact on changing attitudes, encouraging people to speak more about mental health. And we know that those are key drivers in ending the stigma, which will support more of your people to come forward for the support that they need. And what we also look at is the wider impact that This Is Me can have on an organisation's mental health work. And we look at organisations across 10 measures, which you can see on the screen, which really link to the Thriving at Work standards as well, around what good practice around mental health looks like. What we find is that for organisations before they do This Is Me last year, that 40% of them were achieving 7 or more of these measures. And we really feel that if you're doing 7 or more of these measures, you're making fantastic sustainable progress. What we then found was after the same organisations had done This Is Me, this figure increased to 95% of businesses achieving 7 or more of these measures. So what we know is storytelling is incredibly powerful on an individual level, but it really has that power to act as a catalyst for your wider mental health work and builds a really strong culture and foundation to support your wider work, which is really exciting for us as an organisation, but also that's the impact that we want to see in all of your organisations and for all of you and for all of your team and your people within your organisations, because we know that if the culture isn't there, then people won't come forward to get help, even if you've got fantastic employee assistance programs and other support. That culture needs to be there to support it. And so that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I think really for This Is Me, and we've heard that from the other panelists, that the power of sharing our lived experience is really at the crux of what This Is Me is all about. And of course you can listen to me talk about it, but I think the most powerful way to demonstrate that is actually to show one of our This Is Me films. So this is the original This Is Me film from Barclays, and I'm going to close by sharing this all with you now.
I'm a mother, a sister, and a very loyal friend.
I work in finance for the investment bank, and I'm currently studying to become a chartered accountant.
I'm a mum of 1, I'm a musician and a published composer.
I'm married with 3 grown-up children.
I'm on my second year of the FLDP. I'm a history graduate, I'm half Maltese.
I work in employee communications. I'm from Manchester, but I live in London.
I also suffer from depression and have done for nearly 20 years. But I also like to sing, to dance, and to go and see musicals.
I have suffered from clinical depression and have come close to attempting suicide. I represented Barclays at the One Younger World Conference in South Africa. I'm a school governor, male lead in an Hispanic play.
I have multi-impulsive personality disorder. I've been working with people that have mental health problems and disabilities for the past 10 years, and I've been a tattoo cover model.
I suffer from anxiety. I'm a season ticket holder at Brighton and Hove Albion. I can't play football anymore, unfortunately, but I do like to cycle, and I like to go to On My Allotment.
I suffered with anorexia for 7 years. I'm also a huge Man U fan, and I enjoy playing netball and being with my friends.
I have depression. I love having a laugh with my friends. I love to read. I'm a total bookworm.
I'm Beth Bone, and this is my story.
My name is Azair, and this is my story.
I'm Helen, and this is my story.
I'm Mike, and this is my story.
I'm Maria, and this is my story.
I'm Emma, and this is my story.
Wow, thank you, Robin. That does make us stop and think. Grace, can I ask you just to do a formal close, and then we open to however long people want to stay, bearing in mind that Robin's got 10 minutes and Justin, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to stay a few more minutes with us.
Yeah, thank you, Robin, for that wonderful close. It encapsulated so much, I think, of what Justin, Neero and Bryony have also mentioned to us this evening, the neurological, psychological behaviours and how difficult it is to, as Justin mentioned, to control our emotions. Neero mentioning to us about transition, and I think we all need to recognise whether we're leapers or building pillars or traditional hosts, I think.
Traditional holders, yes.
Yeah, recognising those aspects within ourselves, and Bryony as well, mentioning about how we can check in with ourselves, our stress levels, our appetite, our sleep. there's just so much there that I think we can all take away, and start to have these conversations as well with each other. As Bryony touched on as well, opinions. I think there's going to be a lot of changes from a lot of people behaving differently, and it's so great to have all of this knowledge today, so that we can also check in with ourselves to see how we're behaving in a new normal, or a new majority, I think is the new word that we should be using. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone who's attended. And if you've joined us for the first time, please do join us again. We've got another event in July. And if you can also stay on, we've got an informal session immediately after this, where you can raise some questions with our panelists. Thank you so much to everyone involved.
Thank you to my team. This was a fantastic group effort, and everything got arranged by remote, by video, by flat screens that we're living in. And it's just amazing what we have all adapted and managing to cope with in a way that is quite incredible how resilient and adaptable we are.